we'll start there. Parshas Korah. First of all, very briefly, what the setting for this is. Korah separated himself from the rest of the Kohanim, of the Levium, and believed that he should be amongst the heads, if not the head, to be either the level of Aaron HaKohen or even the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. And in doing so, he posed to Moshe Rabbeinu a question which he thought would be something that Moshe Rabbeinu could not answer. And the question, he posed a number of them. Right? More than one of them is brought in Midrashim, but the one that's brought here is, the question he posed to him was a talus which is all techelis, all purple, all the color of the deep blue sea and the sky, and that mystical power of techelis, all of that. If it's all techelis, does it need tzitzis? Because it says about tzitzis, basil techelis, that the tzitzis should have a string, multiple strings, 32 strings actually, which are of techelis. And Korach says, what sense is that? If the whole thing is made of techelis, why do you need strings? So this leads us into the discussion that we're going to start tonight. There are, no matter how you cut it, there are two aspects to the talus. One is the wraparound effect of the talus. That's the garment. And the other is the discrete drawings down of the string. And I mentioned the last time, for those of us on the call who don't put on a talus, talus gadol or talus at all, you have a similar kind of combination of something surrounding and encompassing and something very discrete in the mitzvah of sukkah. Sukkah, you're supposed to make a blessing on the lulav and esrog in the sukkah. The lulav and esrog is daled minim, 4 kinds of things, which connote 4 letters of the Shem Havaya, the 4 directions, north, south, east, and west. And so they're an indication of discrete things which are brought together. The sukkah itself is an all-encompassing. So you stand in something which is all-encompassing, which has no separations, no divisions, and you make a bracha on the divisions. So similarly, when you make a bracha on the talus, you don't say, you say, al mitzvah tzitzis. Blessed Hashem is you who commands us to put on tzitzis. So this is an intro. This is an intro to the topic we're going to start tonight in some depth, by the way, about the all-encompassing light, the talus, and the imminent light, or as Mo said earlier, soivev, all-encompassing, and mamali, filling. Okay, are we good with that? Anybody who needs to say anything about that? Okay, so let's start. Excuse me. Okay. Where's the line? Okay. In Chokmah and Yevon. Boulevard Hadavorim. It's in the middle of the line. Excuse me, to explain these things. In a Tzorech Lahavan, Techila, we have to first understand Inyan or Soive or Maki.
I'm sorry, which line are we in the middle of?
We are in the middle of the second column. The line there begins in the second column. Imen Chochmah Ein Yira. It's if you want to count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 lines down. Second column, bottom of the page, right? Parshas Korah. Well, 12 lines down. Imen Chochmah Ein Yira. Tell me when you find.
Thank you.
Okay, to explain these things, Tzorech Lahavan Techila, first we understand, I need to understand the Inyan of the Or Soiviv and the Or Mamala. Ubechenes Igulim V'Yoisha. And the category which is called in Kabbalistic terms, circles and straight lines. The meaning is this. The or panimi, the inner light, hainu ma shenichnas umisyashev bekli. That's the light that rests inside the vessel. So let me understand. I mean, of course, we're talking about the or in soul, right? The or in soul. So before it manifests itself in multiple infinite rays, it comes from a singular source. But there's more to the story, much more to the story. For a moment, we just have these two lights, the or makif, which is encompassing everything, no division whatsoever. That's the idea of the talus, encompassing, or the sukkah, encompassing, right? And the or panimi, which is very discrete and responsible for the discrete, infinite, discrete number of things which we call worlds and beings. So the or, first of all, the or mamale, or panimi, or mamale, it comes and it's settled in a kli, meaning it takes on the characteristics of the kli. The yoisha, in a straight line. First of all, it's a straight line. It's like a beam. Think of a beam of light, a straight line, right? And this beam of light has different characteristics, depending, of course, on what the source of it is. The beam of light from a flashlight is going to be different than a beam of light from the sun. So difference is the essence of or mamala. And its difference enables it to become enclosed with. A light is here, of course, throughout the whole of Chassidus. Light is an energy, a metaphor for energy. The godly koya, the godly hashpah, the godly flow, takes on different characteristics. And when it expresses itself in different characteristics, that's the or mamala. The yasha, straight line, the hadarga maila umata. And also, it's straight. It also has levels, above and below. It has right, left, middle, above, and below. These 6 directions. They correspond to the 6 midos. Midos also has this notion, something measured out, something discrete. North, south, east, and west, above and below. And this corresponds to Abad, Hagas, Nechiv. Abad, the 3 intellectuals, and then Hagas, the heart and the torso, and the lower part of the body. So the body itself is mapped like this: the head, the heart, and the torso. And that's all mamala kalam. Okay, in short, ubechinas or mamala, ubechinas or mamala, umashalei hoya yochel, excuse me, ubechinas, or mamala, umashalei hoya yochel konus behakli klau, ibnei gadol order. And this or, I think this should say or soivet. 1 second here. This should be or soivet. I don't know if this, it doesn't make sense. It's on the knowledge, but he says that this other or is a light which is able to be enclosed in vessels, is not able to be enclosed in vessels at all. Nothing can contain it. Because of its great light. And this light, which is called the or soivet, stays above the kli. Now this needs explanation. When he says above the kli, it doesn't mean, he will use the expression like hovering from above, right? Hovering is something, but it's hovering in the sense that it doesn't take on any of the characteristics of the thing that it's above. Above means it's in a higher level entirely, and that higher level entirely is a level that's beyond this. It's beyond the definition. It's beyond multiplicity. It's a singularity. It's called the crown. Another level. The crown is on top of the head, and it gives a certain characteristic to the whole king. The king, when you crown the king, his previously mundane body, which is like any other person, takes on an aura, right? And that aura affects everything that he does. When he steps out, he's stepping now like a king. When he puts on his shirt, he's putting on his shirt like a king. So that's the notion of hovering from above, meaning it's above and beyond any discrete kind of interpretation. So that's the Ora Soid. Okay, it's beyond any kind of levels, above and below, abad, nagas, etc., etc. It's beyond. And it stays, and here's the expression, above the kli, meaning not part and parcel of the instantiation of any particular thing. It's bechinas makif. One other characteristic of it, which he doesn't say here, is that it's hidden. When a person, the or mamala, let's say you put your finger on something hot and it moves back. There's an indication there. You don't see the heat, you don't touch it, but there's an indication that there's an immediate cause of some specific activity. That's a mamali experience, right? A soivic experience is that every single thing, no matter an angel above or a grain of sand below, is equally in a state of pure existence. The fact that it exists, its existential state, is an or soivic. Its particular state and particular characteristics is the or mamali. But this or soivic, vigam hu b'chinas eagle. So it's also like a circle. Now, like a circle, you could again think that this language, like a circle, circumscribes a point, but doesn't touch the point of the circle. But here, what it really means, whether it's a circle, is that it has no beginning and no end. A circle has no place that you can say its beginning. When you shoot a dart, that's a mamala, right? It started here and it went over there, right? Directionality is another aspect of mamali kalamim. The soivic kalamim is no directionality because it's everywhere equal. So that's the idea of it being circular. It encompasses the head and the toe equally. This really, I don't know how many of you follow the Yom Yom, but there's an interesting Yom Yom where the Frierdiker Rebbe asks the question that I never saw asked anywhere else. The question is, why is it that the people on the bottom of the earth don't fall off? Right? The answer is because there's no top or bottom on the sphere. Anything, as a result, there is no bottom to fall off of. That's the answer he gives. So that's the or makif, which is makif harosh v'haregel yachad. It encompasses the head and the foot equally. V'hainu is its parenthesis. Bechinas makif hayesher shema olam le'niknas b'hakli. This is something which encompasses everything equally and doesn't enter into the kli. Now it does enter into the kli, the vessel, but it has nothing to do with the particularity of the key. It just has to do with the very essence and existence of the kli. That something exists, and that everything exists regardless of the characteristics is a function of or makif, or soivic. Now, what's known, he's going to tell us something that's known, at least to him. It's known in Eitz Chaim, right? It's safer from the Rizal. Inyan hakab v'chut, the inyan of the beam and the string. All right, these are Kabbalistic metaphors, beam and string. Shenimshach min or, from the or Ein Sof, which are drawn from the infinite one, the or of the infinite one, blessed be he. Shehu bechinas, shehu kidei lias nimshach umer bechinas or panimi, in order to become drawn out and into the or panimi. So this adds something that we haven't had before. There are two characteristics, they're not two lights. There's only one light. But the light has intrinsic to it two possibilities of being from the perspective of the created beings. The light itself is, when we say or Ein Sof, we're talking about a light previous to differentiation. When we talk about Hashem is Yochid, Hashem is alone. That's the state of Hashem before any creation. When we speak about yichud, the unity of the Holy One, blessed be He, and the Shekhinah, you're already talking about two things, like a mother and a father, a husband and wife, two things that are meant to interoperate together. Yachid is alone. From this state of aloneness, that state of aloneness has in it the potential for the everything. Or put it this way, the ayin, which is the no thing, has in it the potential for the everything. The no thing is the or hasoiv. It has no thingness, no specificity. And the potential when it's revealed of the multiplicity is the or mamal. As is known in
Rabbi, I'm sorry. So the multiplicity, as you're hinting at, non-anthropomorphically is differentiation in a conceptual sense.
I don't
Differentiation.
What do you mean?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me or no?
Sure. I'm not sure what you're introducing the word anthropomorphic.
Difference is the multiplicity, the or and sof, which is all encompassing. You gave the example previously of the tzitzit and the talis. But what you're basically trying to say is that the multiplicity emerges from the yachad, the differentiation, but there's no real contradiction. That's the way I.
It's true. It's a contradiction in terms, or by us a paradox, but by him it's not a paradox at all. Right? Singularity and multiplicity are all the same thing. Light and darkness are the same thing. So it's no contradiction at all. However, in the world, in the levels where things exist as separate entities, the one who experiences has a differentiation between the or mamali, which is or hasoive, which is beyond. We said awesome. Remember awesome yira ilah, awesome beyond any sense of getting a hold of it. And then there's the or panimi, which you can get a hold of. There's the energy, the quality of nerve energy that's equal throughout everything in the body, right? It's all coming from one nervous system, but takes on different functions in relation to the organ that it's giving life to. And that's a decent analogy. It takes on when the light or the energy interfaces with the keli being a distinct thing. So then the light has a different quality there, it has a different effect depending on the keli. But all of that is from the perspective of the created being. From the perspective of God himself, there is no paradox, there are no opposites. He says, he is the one who carries everything. Or carries hafakim. That's one of the languages of the Kabbalists about him. He's called, that he's noisei hafakim. He's able to bear opposites, which is singularity and multiplicity at the same time. Whereas we differentiate the singular aspect of Hashem, which is beyond our intellect, and the multiplicity of Hashem, which we can have some understanding. And the multiplicity of Hashem, which we can have some understanding. So, from this singular point, which encompasses everything, right? Hashem beams forth a broad singular light, which is called in the language of Kabbalah, and Chassidus brings it, the Kav, the original beam. And at that point where the original beam emerges, is the Kabbalists describe that point as Adam Kadmon, the primordial man, meaning man will eventually devolve into 10 powers. But those 10 powers at the beginning are in the primordial state, which has no differentiation whatsoever. So everything comes from the or hasoivim, but through the magic of the Tzimtzum is revealed the or mamali. But the or mamali was always latent in the or hasoivim. So, yeah, the Reishis Hagilu, 3 lines up from the bottom, the beginning point where the revelation of where the characteristic of the light changes from soivek to mamalik is chokhmah. Back to what we said at the beginning, koyach ma, the power to have the experience of ma, that which is uninstantiable, unspeakable, uninstantiable, unrepresentable. Chokhmah has an interface to that. And Chokhmah then also becomes the beginning of the whole Mamalik. That's why he's called Rashis or Histelsus, Chokhmah. The Nikra Mamalik Alam. So when the ayin meets the yesh, right, or when the or mamale, the or hasoivel meets chokhmah, chokhmah has this amazing characteristic to draw the ayin into the yesh, which leads to a very profound understanding of God. God isn't the creator. Maybe you've heard this much before. He's not the creator like a silversmith creates a vessel. When this is brought in Tanya. When the silversmith creates a vessel, he's the creator. He can walk away from that thing, and the thing still exists. The Or Hasoidet can never walk away from the Or Mamali because Hashem is Echad. There's only one, even though these are gross dualities. Or Hasoidet and Or Mamali, the Or Hasoidet seeps through into the Or Mamali, so that this is what arises from what David HaMelech says that in Tillim, that La'olam Hashem devorach b'shamayim, that forever Hashem, your speech is in the heavens, right? So the speech, of course, is the articulated multiplicity, but in it is the singularity, and that leads the Baal Shem Tov to tell us in Tanya that if Hashem were to stop speaking, to pull that back into the Yud, back into the singular point, everything would disappear from existence. Multiplicity would have no reality. So multiplicity gets reality from what we call the Or Mamale, but the Or Mamale contains and is always connected with the Or HaSoidim. Back to your talus. It's one thing. It's a wraparound and it's a string at the same time. You can't have a talus without the baguette, the garment, neither can you have it without the strings. The two together, the Or and the Soiber, make this singular experience, which we call reality. Okay, 3 lines up from the bottom. The beginning of revelation, meaning the beginning of the appearance of multiple things, starts in Hak. And why is it called filling all worlds? Because it illuminates the world according to the level of the world, the level of the thing that needs to be illuminated. Right? So you have a difference between, a 1,000-watt bulb and a 60-watt bulb. And you have to be careful. You wouldn't want to put the infusion of that much current into a 60-watt bulb. You'd have nothing left but pieces of glass. So the modulation occurs. Hashem modulates the Or Mamale, but always within the Mamale is the undercurrent of the Or Soibe, but the modulated light is called the Or Inim. Okay, Or in Sabor Hamaki, but the one that encompasses all worlds, the Shova, from the head of Adam Kadmah, from the head of the primordial man, Ad Ragloi, into his feet. Again, Adam Kadmah is the nascent state of multiplicity of the construct that we call the 10 spheros, right? And in the supernal man, they're the 10 spheros. In the earthly man, they're the 10 powers. But they're all rooted in the Or HaSodim. That junction point is the beginning of the Kav, is called Adam Kadmah, the primordial man. V'gam Makif es Kav. And this Or Makif encompasses the Kav. And that's another way of saying it. Remember, encompasses doesn't mean from above. It infiltrates all the minuscule subatomic particles of everything equally. It's not responsible for the differences. That's Mamalik Alam, but it's responsible for the very existence of any.
Rabbi, I'm sorry. What you're saying is incredible, and it also.
I'm sorry.
I
Sorry, I didn't.
Sorry.
I talked over you. Go ahead. What are you saying?
I'm sorry, no, Rabbi, I apologize. I thought what you're saying is incredible because it dovetails with the concept. You know, Hashem is a part of those subatomic particles, and He created man. Then it actually gives a hint at the ultimate teleological objective of the creation of man to be once again at the end of the process with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, because he's a part of that creation. It's interactive. I mean, as you mentioned, so he's part of those particles, and he's continually part of it. It's not as if, as you mentioned before, if he withdraws from creation, creation ceases to exist. But a man's potentiality in the end of the process, I would assume, is to be one again with Kadosh Baruch Hu. That was just a hint. I would assume it's the teleological process of creation. Sorry, I'll go off.
To be one with him. Now, the root of the makifim. Oh, we said the makifim were the highlights that are responsible for the existence and the enlivenment, so to speak, of everything. It has a root. Where does it come from? It's nimshach mibechinas egulim. It comes from the level of the Kabbalah is called circles. Even though its effect is through the beam, but think of the beam like a carrier beam. It's a beam and it's carrying the or hamakif with it. So that's where it originates. That's where it begins its effect. So it's called circles, but it doesn't appear as circular, meaning everywhere the same. On the contrary, it's manifest through the or mamale and differentiated as a result of that. So it's nimshachim, it's drawn. The or hasoive, the igulim, is drawn into and through the kav, the beam, the kav and the hoot. The hoot is a string, which harks back to the strings of our talis. That's how the or hasoive is drawn into things through the or mamala. Gam hamakifin shebekol ha'olamus, and that's how
before we go forward, okay, we just said that's how it's drawn into things. Would you please explain that, because that part I'm not fully getting, how it's drawn into things.
I'm sorry, I didn't. You're not coming clearly. Say it again.
Would you please explain before we go forward how it's drawn into things?
I won't. He'll speak about that.
Okay.
And if it's not clear, I'll try to clarify. But okay, but all we know right now is but you're interesting because this is another point that hasn't been made before, and he's just introducing it, which is that the makifim, even though the makifim are drawn into reality through the kav and the chut and the string, that through the strings, through the kavs, through the beams, are also drawn the makifim, shebekol ha'olamus, of all the worlds. Nevertheless, shoresh hamakifim, the root of these makifim, nimshach mebechinas ha'igel hagadol, is called the igel hagadol, the big circle, eagle. I don't know why, I always think in the English word eagle, circling birds, circling, even though there's etymologically no relationship. But there's the big circle, hamakifes hakav, which encompasses the kav and the chut. All right, so this introduces an idea that we haven't had touched on yet. There are levels of makifim. Think about this. A decent mushal, waves going through water, right? There is an invisible force that's going through a body of water. Let's call it an ocean. Now, except, erase the fact that depending on certain ecological and environmental factors, the waters are going to behave differently. But imagine a hunk of that water through which the water can be resolved into drops, right? We have drops, but at the same time, they can dissolve into an amorphous, what's the noun for it? An amorphous structure, which has no particular drop quality or separation quality at all. And yet there's an equal force going through all of it, which is moving this water. And I'm not talking about descending water. I'm talking about the wave and particle, right? So that gets us into the scientific, realm, waves and particles. And this, of course, I'm not by any means an expert in quantum physics, by no means, but I've learned enough about it to touch on a way at least in which it's analogous, that the quantum physics has a discussion, even an argument of what is light. Is light a wave or a particle? And the fact is that it sometimes takes on functions of particularity, and sometimes it takes on part of the function of being wave, meaning indivisible. So those things, and I'm trying to get to, in a way, this, I think, and I hope, gets a bit to your question, how the makif can act and be carried through the panimi, which is what he's saying. The makif shebekol olamus, even though, third line down, even though the source of the makifim is from the circular, the eagle hagadol, a makif es hakav, which encompasses the kav, Valder kamoy hamelech. No, Malchus, like the sphere of Malchus. I was going to talk about sphere of Malchus, and keep in mind if this sheds any light on what you're saying. But first of all, the notion that in order for any particularity to exist at all, because in order for anything to exist at all, it has to have elikus, godliness within it. And that elikus is everywhere equal. Its manifestation, the makif, the manifestation of the makif is in very particular ways. 4 worlds, myriad infinite number of creatures in them. But again, so another way of putting it, they are all equally in a state of, number 1, existence, and number 2, in a state of aliveness, having a life force within them. So this is linguistically, I'm explaining this just in language, the union of makif and panimi. For a thing to be a thing, which would be an individual thing, and that's the or mamali. For it owes its existence to the fact that there's an energy in it, which is, number 1, bringing it into existence constantly, and number 2, giving it life and energy. And that is the or makif. So this is or makif fused with or panimi, which is what he said above it. The makifim of all the worlds penetrate into the mamalim of all the worlds. So with that, I think I've answered your question. So let me stop.
What was that last word, Rabbi? I couldn't hear it. The malim of all the worlds. What did you just say?
Jonathan, please hold. I've tried to answer Elise's question. I just want to know if that answers.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Jonathan, what's your brief point?
What was the term that you used? Lamalim. There was a phrase you used that I didn't pick up, and I couldn't. At the very end of what you just said.
I don't know.
Lamalim. That's why I interrupted immediately, because you said something and I didn't understand. I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll have to. I don't know what I said then.
Okay.
We'll go on. Okay.
So wait, I just want to. Can I just ask something too? So the kav is not really like I picture it like a straight line that, like, we have like this infinite light that can come through the kav and differentiate, but it's not that really. It sounds to me like what you're saying, it's really like in circles, like it's like everything that's here, it's like in circles, and how things can come into its sort of existence is through the kav, but it's not linear, right?
Everything is both linear and circular. There's no mamali without soive, and the whole purpose of soive is mamali. Again, the simple words, and this is language from Tanya, defining the way that I've done it twofold. Soive is responsible for that everything and anything is in a state of being, and it has enlivening energy in it. Its particular way of being and the particular quality of the light and the energy that's within it, the difference between a man and a piece of dirt, that's a function of Mamali. But Soiviv and Mamali are like, you know, what's the analogy that Chazal give, and it's given in Tanya? It's like if you come across the snail, which is hard bone, and the soft thing that sticks out of the snail, very, oozy goozy. If you take away that oozy goozy, that's the metaphor for the or soida, then the snail dies, because it's the life force and the state of being, and that the life force and that it is in a state of being, comes from soida. That it's a particular way of being comes from Mamali. The two are always coexisting. Is that clear?
Rabbi, what was Lamale? You just said it again.
Yes.
I don't know what the
Wait,
translation
one
is.
second. If I may, I'm sorry, but if
No,
I may,
I just want
because not everyone may be familiar with a snail, and I know I learned about a snail in real life. A balloon is another example where you have the air that fills up the balloon, but you have the balloon itself that encompasses the air. So that's sort of like,
good.
I don't-
Good. And I want to come back to yes. Did that address your question? Hmm? You're not okay. I'll take it that you're walking around you soon. But if it didn't, I'd like to know. Because the important point is you can't have one without the other. Well, you could have one without the other, but you never have anything that is anything that's created without the or hasoibe being in that thing.
Right. So you're saying like the Sovav is really the life force coming through. The Mamali is differentiating all of that existence,
Yes.
all of the existence. And then you have like sort of like the Kav is like holding both.
The kav is holding both. When you would call it a kav, we're looking at its beamness, right? It's like that. But we know, as we've just been taught this, that couldn't exist at all, couldn't have any existence at all without the Or HaSoiva, which gives existence to everything. But its particular existence is a function of the Or Mamali. They go together, never separated. Well, derech, where are we? Where am I going to pick up? Okay. Yeah, we'll get onto this. The third line, we're going to the fourth line down, the beginning, Haggadah. The source of these makifim is what's called the Eagle Haggadah, the big circle. And he doesn't explain it here, so I'll try to explain it. I will explain it, but outside. There's the creation as a whole, right? We call it the creation, right? And we've said, for that to be the creation with its infinite number of distinct and disparate entities, there has to be the Or HaSoiva. So that's called the Makif Haggadah, the all-encompassing, which encompasses every part of creation. And then we have worlds, right? And each world has a Makif to it. Makif is also synonymous with what's called in Chassidus the Kesser, the crown. I mentioned it earlier, right? The crown, it sits on top of the king's head, which is an indication that it's not a panimi. It's not invested inside himself. It's on top of his head. Yet, it gives the total characteristic of kingship is what is that's the result of the crown. And we know, or maybe I don't know if you know, but if you've learned in fairly most of this, there are kesorim, there are crowns in every world. There's the kesser to Malchus, the crown of Malchus, the crown of, the sphera of Malchus of the bottom of Atzilus becomes the crown to the world of Bria. So this is like birth. There's another good way to look at this. the specific fetus, right? That one is surrounded initially by a placenta and a womb, right? And that womb environment and the placenta are what keeps that fetus alive and intact until that fetus comes out and has a life of its own. And let's say it's a female, and it recapitulates over and over again. The female becomes the womb for the next fetus. And so that metaphor goes on and on, right? Throughout time, generation after generation. It also goes on throughout place in terms of creation after creation after creation. Every level of creation has a market environment, a womb environment, a placenta environment, which gives life to it. And then it gets spawned outward and develops its own. So this is the concept. I'm giving you, a metaphor for the concept of levels of makifim, levels of encompassment, which is what he's saying now. The fourth line down. There's the Eagle Hagodol, the line begins with Hagodol, which is Hamakif as a Kav, which that encompasses the Kav. Remember, the Kav is the source of all individuation. It's the first instantiation of Tzimtzum. It's where the Ein Sof meets the Rohut, right? It's where allness first defines singularity. And that's the Kav. And that's what they call the Eagle Hagadol, because it's going to give rise to everything. And then all the everything is going to have its own substructures in which there is a crown to that substructure, and then that devolves lower, and then there's a crown to the next one. So the original, or the primordial, that's really the right word, because it's number one, always existent, and then there comes a point where it emerges in that point of the first influence, the first indication of light, which is called the Kav, and that's called the Eagle Hagadol, Amakit es Kav, which encompasses the ray, the Kav in the Hut, the ray in the spring. That's where we were before. Valder Kamai Hamalchus, like the sphere of Malchus. Af Shenimshika Mizor, even though Malchus is drawn from Zoh. Now I don't know each of your particular levels, some more than others, but I think we'll just have to get in, so they always go to the most basic. There are 10 spheros in each and every world, right? From Chokmah to Malchus. Malchus is the bottom, but Malchus inherits everything from before, and Malchus becomes the Kesser, the crown of the world below. That's why it's called king or queen, Melech or Malchus, because it's regency. Regency, it's kingship. So these recapitulate in all the worlds, and we divide these many infinite number of recapitulations. In Chassidus, we divide them mainly into 4 big ones: Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. And each one, Malchus becomes the crown of the world, or the Soivev, the or Soivev, to the world below. So this is Malchus. Even though Malchus is drawn from Zoh, right? Hesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, and that's a Yesod, and then Yesod channels everything into Malchus, even though that's true. Yeah. Shemitiferes, the Zoh, Nasa, Keser, Lenukva. That from the Midah of Tiferes, which is the middle Kav, right? We have Keser on the top, and then the next middle Kav is Tiferes. When you don't count Keser, the next middle is Das. When you count Keser, the next thing down is Tiferes. That's the interinclusion of 2 opposites. Hesed and Gevurah give you an interinclusion. Interinclusion, anything that has an ability to reconcile opposites, is a makif kind of quality. Malchus erases distinctions and creates blends, which the blend is something in itself. So we have the Malchus inheriting from Zoh. Yeah. Shemit Tiferes, the line begins from Tiferes. Tiferes the Zoh, the Tiferes of the Midos, becomes Keser Lenukva, becomes the crown to nukva. Nukva is the feminine who receives from Yesod, directly from Yesod, which is the masculine. And what is this? This is simply that the hashpah, the flow, that the flow of the makif channels through this particular sphere, which is called malchus. Aval b'shorsha, however, in her root, the root of Kesser, the makif hagadol, the big makif, the original makif, he nechelcha mishorish elyon. That malchus above, in malchus of Atzilus, or we even speak about in other Chassidus, malchus the Ein Sof. Remember, all the qualities that ever are going to be talked about from our mouths as qualities all exist in a primordial state where they're not recognizable as qualities at all, because that's at a level deeper than quality has yet to come into being. So, Ava B'Shorsha at root, Hunikluchon, Mishorish Elyon, they're all rooted from a supernal source, Bifne Atzma, each one on its own. Malchus of Atzilus is getting a Kesser quality, a Malchus quality, or Makif quality from Kesser of Ein Sof. And Malchus of Bria is getting that quality in a diminished way from Malchus of Atzilus, etc. And Malchus of Yetzirah gets it from Malchus of Bria all the way down. So these are Makifim within Makifim, or another way of saying it, circles within circles. And that's not me saying, that's the language that's used in Kabbalah. Circles within circles. Okay, and each one getting from a higher source. Kamei b'tefilas Nila, like in Nila. And I honestly don't know how to apply this. Maybe someone else does. Neila. I mean, what we can say about Neila, we all know, is we're all drawn into that starting place, behind the curtain, so to speak, which is maybe what he is inferring. But beyond that, maybe that is what he's inferring, but I don't have anything definitive to say about that. But in the Ela, we're all drawn up into the singular place. When he closes the gate, and we're all before the gate. Before the gate is the Ormak. Shenikra Oz Ateres Baila. And that level is called the crown to the husband. The husband is the force of giving out particular things, and the Ateres, the crown, is the Kesser Malchus. Eshes Chayil Ateres Baila. Eshes, the Esha is Malchus, but here it's in the feminine form, right? Malka, queen. Malchus in the feminine form, because the feminine form is what's going to nurture. We've used this before. Feed and nurture in an internal way that's invisible to the outside world, which is another way of looking at or makif, right? It's a lot going on there, but nothing that you can see, nothing is differentiated. There is no outside world yet to have an eye on it whatsoever. So this is the feminine form of the Kesser, and that gives rise to the Hasidic Drosh, Eshes Chayil Ateres Baila, that woman of valor, meaning a woman who is the embodiment of the Or Makif, she's again surrounds the fetus, is the Eshes Chayil Ateres, is the crown to her husband, which is the realm of things which are going to come out in differentiated ways. I mean, when I learned this, I never saw my wife in the same way. I remember years ago. Eshes Chayil Ateres Baila. It's in a man, a husband, it can take, and the effect can be a certain amount of given overness that you may not have had before. Well, Derek in the same manner, Gamkein, Midos. Midos means measures, the things which are measured out. That's why they're called Midos. They're differentiated. As the Gemara refers, the Midos in relation to Seichel. Seichel gives rise to the Midos. The Asha Hamidas Noildi Mihaseichel, even though Midos are drawn from Seichel, I understand something is good for me, therefore I have an attraction toward it, right? But it's through this that I recognize that it's good for me, and therefore the Seichel is what gives rise to the midah of chesed in the example I'm giving. So ein ze ela, this is only because shehaseichel goydim laheledes. It's only because the seichel is causing a birth, the hisavis of midos. So here, seichel is the makif, and midos is the panimi. So we're introducing a relative kind of structure. The general force that gives rise to anything in particular is the makif, and the particular is the panimi. Now there is a gan came hamidus lagavi seichel, midos in relation to seichel. Even though midos are born from seichel, it's just that the seichel is causing them to come into, to be born, the hisavis hamidos, and it's coming to be bringing about the being of the midos. Aval ikar hamidos, but the root of the midos is like the seichel is the proximate cause of the midos. The ikar hamidos, the shor shoy in the source of the midos, nechel from the makif, comes from the makifim, elyon yosu, much higher level than seichel. So seichel is the proximate cause, it's what brings it about, but its root is much higher, and that's true of the entire of anything and everything, anything you see or touch, or even beyond your see and touch, that has existence, though it may have come into existence from a precedent cause, as in cause and effect. The whole realm of cause and effect is mamalikol, right? Cause and effect, and then the effect becomes a cause to something else in a chain reaction, and that's why it's called seder histalshalos, the chain of descent. That's all mamalik. And though one thing is a proximate cause, the root of everything that exists in that structure is the makif, which encompasses everything. And it says, there's a pasuk again. The Yafa koyach haben, no, it's pasuk, it's a man razal. Yafa koyach haben mikoyach ha'av. Right? There's a interesting teaching that literally more beautiful, prettier, nicer is the power of a child than the father, right? And hoping that you can see that in your family, either you as an offspring of a parent or your offspring in relation to you. But there's a certain something, that a quality that exists in the offspring that wasn't so revealed in the parent. As written in another place, the fathers and the mothers, they were a chariot. They were a chariot for something else. There was, right? They were riding and guiding, but the fact that they were there in the first place was from a higher level entirely. And also the Gabirut Suyas of Tefillin Shel Reish. Here he talks about the Reish, the Tefillin Shel of the head. And this is back to like tzitzis and talis. There's the coming down, and the Tefillin of the head encompass the whole being. I mean, you're supposed to have the leather straps of a certain length, but they come down toward the bottom of the body as well, and they can be very long. I don't know halakhically how long. I mean, I don't know how short they can be and still be kosher. But the point we're at here is they're long because they encompass a good part of the body. The straps of the tefillin shel reish versus tefillin shel yad, which is wrapped up tightly in a very strict number of wrappings, which is the or panimi. So this is also the soyas tefillin shel reish, and you can read more about this in the explanation on the pasuk Mini Kachaisim, which is another minor somewhere in the Kutei Torah. And here it starts to quote a lot of other sources. Ayin Shom, see over there. He just references just briefly. It's a similar paradigm, right? That there's an allness, the tefillin shel reish, it's coming from the top. The skull, by the way, is the crown. The skull, the soft material, the brain is seichel, and skull is higher. It is higher physically, and it's meant to be pictorial, in a pictorial sense, to be an allusion to the Ora Soimer, which encompasses the safe. And it sticks on your head. Okay, on the hard part of your head, not even though it says between your eyes. If a Chachamim had to learn through, well, from Moshe, the oral Torah, that it isn't between your eyes, it's on top of your head, meaning its source is the Or HaSofer. It's something to think about for the people on this call who put on tefillin, a little bit different way of contemplating what's going on every morning when you put on tefillin. See over there. In the same way, Yuv and Kant, you will understand over here, this relates to the makifim, the all-encompassing. The afal pisha nimshachim hakav, even though they're drawn from the kav, the kol mokim, nevertheless, shorsho, right? The kav is the proximate source of everything, but the root source of everything is the source of everything is bechinas milamayla min hakav, something which is deeper than the kav, which is the or a soidim. Right, Mashikos see over here in another place. The yard is see over there. The Indian Olma Discasio. And he doesn't talk over here.
Which is isn't that the Ma'or?
Pardon me?
Isn't that that like this? You said the Or Sovev, is that like the Ma'or?
The Moer, right? The source of life.
Yeah. The source of life.
Exactly. The source of life. The Moer, like the sun. And the sun, which is good. I mean, you said it, but it's also obviously in time. He uses that most of itself. The more is the sun is the source of radiation, right? But the beams come from it, but there's no beams in the sun. Beams come from it, but there's no beams in the sun. Everything in its own fine definition comes from the singular source, but in the singular source, or makif, there's no definition.
Right, just like Chesed, Gevurah, all of the mitos, they're part of the sun itself. Not the sun. It's part of the Ma'or itself, but you can't say that they exist.
Right.
They're all part of the oneness, right?
Yes.
But it's in the oneness of the Sovev or the
Moer, the oneness of the radiator.
right. They're not differentiated at all. It's all just one.
Exactly. Right. Very good. It's also another word he hasn't used yet. This is the first time. Another characteristic is they're miskasa. They're hidden. The differentiation is there in potential, but what's there in actual is not differentiation. Differentiation is hidden in the allness. It's miskasa. It's hidden. And that's a quality of the Or Makif. I mean, in its gross meaning, lower manifestations, where we see this organ has a certain function, and this particular finger has a different way of being than the thumb. All that differentiation, right, is what is ultimately responsible for that is not the proximate cause, but the real cause is that state of differentiation that exists before differentiation occurred in a hidden state where the differentiation was hidden. Shehu bechinas makif. We call it also that. So when you come across the word Hashem is the hidden of all hiddens, that's an expression. What we mean by that is that that's referring to the state pre-differentiation, primordial allness. And from there comes, not from there. This is a very big hiddush that I've learned recently that the Rebbe Rashab says, that there's primordial allness and there's primordial differentiation. In other words, those mitos also exist, but in a primordial state where there's no differentiation. And that they come into differentiation through God concealing his allness, that's called a tzimtzum, right? And once they're revealed, they carry, however, with them the Or Makif, which was common to them in their source. And that's what we mean by Ein Od Milvado. Very simple. There was nothing besides it. And you say, what do you mean there's nothing besides it? Look at all this stuff. All this stuff is a manifestation of a way of being which is sourced and never loses its root in the source of non-differentiation. Shehu Bechinas Makif, which is called Makif. Whoa. We're gonna have another sentence and we're gonna stop. We're not stop for tonight. This was voted on last time. There was a small group, but the small group voted to go through this because it's so fundamental. But we're gonna go finish the sentence. Shehu Bechinas Makif, what we just described. Lochen, therefore, Shorshoy, the source of it all, the source of everything in a state which it doesn't manifest its thingness and its everythingness, is Bechinas Soger Kalam. Ayin Shom, see over there in the mimer that he referred to, the Divrei Maskil Oz Yosha. And that is where we're going to stop for tonight. Any last questions? I'm going to ask
Can you just, I'm sorry, like translate the last line?
the last line. After the word, the beginning where the line is a scarf is it's hidden, right? Alma discussion. That line?
Yes, yes.
That hidden world, Shehu Bechinas Makif, and I said that's a quality of Makif. It can never be revealed because if it's revealed, there it is. And Makif is never there; it's always everywhere. You can't, right? So it's Makif, that's hidden. Lachen, therefore, Shorshoy Bechinas Soger Kalam. This state, which we call Alma Discussion, this is language of Kabbalah. The hidden world. What does the hidden world refer to? The hidden world refers to the state of godliness in the state of Soger Kalam. And then he just says, Ayin Shom, see over there in the mimer that he had mentioned previously, the Divrei Maskil, where the words begin, Oz Yosher. The mimer begins, Oz Yosher, from Shmos. And it's another mimer. He says, if you want to know, get into this from another angle and deeper, go look in that one. This section of this is full of references to other places.
Rabbi Jonathan, I raised my hand before. I don't know if you saw it. Rabbi, I don't understand. I understand what you're saying, but what I don't understand is when we speak about in potential, differentiation in potential, doesn't that automatically assume that the seeds for differentiation are in the Makif? I mean, we're making this distinguishing point, but anything that exists in potentia, which comes into existence, so that's basically what you're basically saying, is that the differentiation exists in the Makif, in potentia. I mean, I'm just wondering if that might be an easier way to explain it for people to understand it. That's all.
That is in potential. That's what we've been saying. Yes, you could sum up and say that's what we've been saying. Differentiation exists, but in a state of potential when it's in a state of Makif. Correct. So I want to ask the question that I always ask when I remember to ask, so what? Right? Do you remember the title? I don't know if you guys even know. I entitled these, I have a Tanya so what, and this class, Chassidus so what. What do we do with this? What, besides that we had an interesting, hopefully, evening discussing these things, what will we do with it? What difference will this make to us tomorrow or the next second?
Well, if no one's going to say something, maybe I have an idea about it, because I was thinking about this as you were speaking of like, when we're just going through life, we have now like a little bit more chokmah, or like idea of how things are working. So we could look at ourselves and the world as everything in like this, like Jonathan said, like potential, and that and that we're just sort of like constantly being renewed and always getting this the makif coming through, like just seeing things like in a higher form as opposed to just face value, and having an appreciation that everyone has their gifts and ways about them, and it's coming straight from Hashem, from an infinite source that's coming through. Like just like seeing things higher.
Yes. It gives us a very different sense of the oneness that we have with each other. And also, viva la difference, to be able to celebrate and be in tune with the differences that we are from each other. Because it's all coming from Ein Od Milvado. It's so you can, I mean, I'm just elaborating on what you're saying because I'm thinking out loud also. I think this is for the way I'm thinking about it now tonight, a very good kind of contemplation. I mean, and to bring about more Ahavas Yisrael. You know, yes, we're all different, but at the same time,
Right, because it's all one, and especially like we, being able to, because if we know that MS, that we know that there's room for all of it, I mean, there's not room for certain things. I think that certain behaviors that aren't, like
yeah,
they're not about life. It's about,
right.
that's different.
Plus, I mean, I saw something, Gimel Thomas reading about many things about the Rebbe's perspective. And one of them was dealing with exactly this, which is, yeah, of course, there are manifestations, there are beams which are not aligned correctly. But in the core of every Jew, there is a spark of godliness which is never ever becomes impure. Right? The heart of the Nefesh Elokis, no matter what the behaviors, never gets sullied. That's the English translation of the word that he uses. It's always intact. And that's the or, which is always connected with Hashem Echad. And if you look at that, you can find openings for dealing with, first of all, I know this word is a negative word, tolerating, but when someone comes into, as people come into my office, and I have people come into my office who are totally like worse, stoned is not the right word. A couple of street people who are on fentanyl and addicted. And at first glance, when I'm doing my work and I look up, I'll be honest, an initial reaction is, oh my gosh, what, he smells, blah, blah, blah. But we settle into it because, and the only way I can settle into it is to keep in mind this, that there is a godly soul with this ungodly behavior.
Right, totally.
Elisa? Lizzie, you had your hand.
What I've been thinking about throughout in terms of, B'chein, is that if we really align ourselves and we're always, the reality is we're always aligned. It's our perception that we need to properly align in terms of, that connection and our receptiveness to the connectivity. That's what we need to align. And when we do, then we can tap into so much within ourselves, because
then what?
we can tap into so much more potential within ourselves. And that if we just need to believe in our own ability to tap into our own potential, because it really is so much greater than we really often allow ourselves to see.
Good. That's a good solo.
That is very true. That's a very good point. Thank you for sharing that.
Jonathan, your hand up again?
Yes, Rabbi, you asked me what's the takeaway for this.
Yeah.
I think it's consciousness. Hakara, as it's say in Hebrew. An awareness and consciousness that the Kadosh Baruch Hu is everywhere and we're part of a greater purpose. So we understand part of the process of creation different. We understand the concept that he's here with us in this period of time, everything we see. And it's part of a greater teleological process, the process of creation, which hasn't stopped. And I don't mean that in a Greek sense of physical creation. I mean, everything around us is part of a greater purpose, even if we don't fully understand it. But it gives a greater solace in understanding to everything we see, every particle, every building, everything. It gives us an understanding. and the feeling that we're part of, not in part of, in terms of a system like the greater whole, but it gives an understanding that there's much more, and we're part of a much more spiritual process.
Very beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Yes. Okay, if anybody else, if not, then let's go live it until we meet again. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you so much. Kol tov.